They had 15 minutes of oxygen left. Maybe less. Sergeant Maya Reynolds pressed her ear against the radio transmitter, desperate for any sign of life beyond the static. The explosion had collapsed the mountain tunnel entrance, trapping her squad 600 feet underground in Taliban territory. Backup was 3 hours away, if anyone even knew they were alive. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Maya never planned on becoming a hero. At 32, she moved through the dusty corridors of Forward Operating Base Condor like a ghost, her footsteps silent against the gravel paths that connected the command center to the barracks. The scent of diesel fuel and military-grade coffee had become her world, a far cry from the suburban life in Portland she'd left behind years ago. Most soldiers stationed at FOB Condor knew Maya as the quiet communications specialist who kept to herself, fixing equipment and maintaining radio protocols with methodical precision. What they didn't know was that Maya possessed skills that could navigate troops through impossible terrain and coordinate extractions with uncanny precision. During her 4 years with Tactical Operations Command, she had memorized every topographical detail of the Hindu Kush Mountains, creating mental maps of cave systems and mountain passes that even local guides couldn't match. While other communications specialists focused on equipment maintenance, Maya had taught herself advanced navigation during midnight shifts in the communications bunker. Her mind cataloged every valley, every ridgeline, every potential choke point across the Afghanistan-Pakistan border region. The military bureaucracy had labeled her non-essential personnel during a regional restructuring, burying her revolutionary tactical mapping system in classified files without attribution. Sergeant Reynolds, the woman who had created a breakthrough method for predicting insurgent movement patterns, was quietly reassigned to equipment maintenance and forgotten. But some talents refused to stay buried. The radio transmission from Lieutenant Colonel James Harmon arrived on a Tuesday that would change everything. Maya had been monitoring secondary channels, betting that unused frequencies might reveal insurgent communications. The message was fragmented but unmistakable. Talon Squad, ambush, tunnel collapse, coordinates 34. 51 degrees north, 70. 27 degrees east. Her modest quarters overlooked the helicopter landing zone, where she began each morning with instant coffee in a steel mug, watching Black Hawks and Chinooks carve patterns against the Afghan sky. The rotor's shadows danced across her sparse room like a promise she wasn't ready to believe. The night after intercepting Harmon's transmission, Maya sat at her folding table with topographical maps spread before her and a custom communications array she'd assembled from salvaged military hardware. Her fingers traced potential extraction routes automatically, identifying the most likely location of the trapped squad based on terrain features and known tunnel systems. Maya knew exactly where Talon Squad was trapped, but command had dismissed her report as speculative. "We need confirmation from primary channels, not intercepted fragments," Captain Mitchell had said, his voice tight with dismissal. "Focus on your assigned duties, Reynolds. Rescue operations are beyond your clearance level." FOB Condor's operations center gleamed with military efficiency. The next morning, wall-mounted screens displayed satellite imagery of the ambush zone while commanders debated rescue options with the confident certainty of men who had never been trapped underground. The consensus was bleak: a rescue mission would require 6 hours of preparation and execution at minimum. By then, oxygen levels in the collapsed tunnel would be depleted. Maya arrived at the tactical planning room uninvited, carrying a handmade topographical model and wearing her standard-issue combat fatigues. The rescue patch on her sleeve was barely hanging on, its threads worn thin from countless deployments. Her grandfather had been a search and rescue specialist in Vietnam, passing the patch to her with words that had become her mantra: "Find them when no one else can." That's when Major Richard Coleman strode into the room like a force of nature. Tall, steel-eyed, with ribbons covering his chest like armor, he moved with the confidence of someone whose orders were never questioned. His gaze swept the room with sniper precision, cataloging each officer as either useful or irrelevant. "Gentlemen," his voice carried 2 decades of combat authority. "We have a critical situation with limited options. the official assessment gives Talon Squad approximately 3 hours of oxygen. Extraction within that time frame is. He paused meaningfully, unlikely. His gaze lingered on Maya longer than the others, taking inventory of her worn boots, unauthorized equipment modifications, and the rubber band containing her hair. When their eyes met, something cold and calculating flickered across his expression, a judgment rendered before she could speak a single word. The tactical assessment revealed the challenge ahead. Satellite imagery showed a mountain tunnel entrance collapsed by an IED, with suspected insurgent positions surrounding the area. Ground transport would take too long. Helicopter insertion risked enemy fire. And no one had been able to establish direct communication with the trapped squad to confirm their status or location. Maya slipped into the back of the briefing room and immediately detected the problem with their analysis. The tunnel system they were examining on the main display wasn't a simple straight passage as their outdated maps suggested. It contained 3 branching corridors with potential exit points that weren't marked on any official documentation. She had discovered these details during her personal mapping project, information that remained buried in her classified reports. The planning sequence felt suffocating, officers debating options that would all arrive too late. When the briefing concluded, the consensus was grim: prepare a rescue operation but acknowledge that it would likely become a recovery mission. 10 soldiers would likely be lost. Coleman reviewed the options with visible frustration bordering on resignation. Every minute we debate, their oxygen depletes further. But rushing in blindly puts more lives at risk. We need intel we don't have and time we can't create. Maya's voice cut through the murmur of tactical discussions. Sir, there's another approach we haven't considered. The room fell silent. Coleman's expression hardened to granite. Specialist Reynolds, this briefing is restricted to command personnel. How did you access this room? Sir, I can reach Talon Squad within 90 minutes, Maya continued, ignoring his question. There's a secondary access point to that tunnel system that isn't on our maps. Coleman's jaw tightened. Are you instructing me on tactical operations, specialist? Based on what authority or intelligence? Based on terrain analysis and mapping work I completed last year, Maya replied evenly. The documentation was submitted but never implemented. The Major's expression darkened further. This isn't a time for speculation, Reynolds. We're discussing an active rescue operation requiring precision and verified intelligence. Maya met his gaze steadily. With respect, sir, it isn't speculation. I've mapped every tunnel system in that region and created enhanced topographical models that identify hidden access points. I can get a small team to the secondary entrance before their oxygen runs out. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Coleman studied her with naked skepticism. And how exactly would you know the location of tunnel systems that don't appear on official maps? Because I've spent the last 2 years creating those maps, Maya answered. During off hours and between assignments. The project was submitted through proper channels but classified as non-essential. The tension in the room was palpable as officers exchanged uncomfortable glances. Coleman's expression shifted from dismissal to calculation. And you're certain about this secondary entrance? He asked, his voice slightly less hostile. Yes, sir. It's a narrow access shaft approximately 1.2 kilometers southeast of the main entrance. It would allow a small extraction team to bypass insurgent positions completely. Captain Mitchell, who had dismissed Maya's initial report, stepped forward with visible irritation. Major, with all due respect, Specialist Reynolds is a communications technician, not a tactical operator. Her assessment is speculative at best and dangerous at worst. Coleman held up his hand, silencing Mitchell mid-sentence. His eyes never left Maya's face as he seemed to weigh impossible choices against dwindling time. You have exactly 2 minutes to convince me, Reynolds, he said finally. Show me what you've got. Maya moved to the main tactical display without hesitation. She inserted a data drive containing her mapping files, and the standard terrain view transformed into a detailed three-dimensional model with tunnel systems highlighted in red. The difference between her maps and the official documentation was immediately apparent. Where military intelligence showed a single primary tunnel, Maya's model revealed an intricate network of passages carved into the mountain over decades. This is based on historical data, local informant information, and terrain analysis, she explained, highlighting the secondary entrance with a digital marker. The tunnel complex was originally built in the 1980s during the Soviet occupation, then expanded by local militia groups. Official documentation only captures about 40% of the actual structure. The room fell silent as commanders studied the display with newfound intensity. Maya continued with methodical precision. Based on the explosion location and subsequent collapse, Talon Squad would be trapped here. She indicated a chamber roughly 600 meters from the secondary entrance. A small team could reach them through this access point, bypassing both the collapse and enemy positions. Coleman studied the display, then turned to his operations officer. Verify this against any intelligence we have, immediately. Within minutes, the verification came back. Limited satellite thermal imaging showed heat signatures that aligned with Maya's tunnel mapping. It wasn't conclusive proof, but it suggested her assessment had merit. Coleman's expression remained unreadable as he turned back to Maya. Let's assume you're correct about the tunnel system. The operation would still require a specialized extraction team, equipment for potential medical emergencies, and transportation capacity we don't currently have available. I can lead the extraction myself, Maya replied without hesitation. I need 3 personnel with combat medical training, minimal extraction equipment, and a single helicopter for rapid transport. The dismissive murmur that swept through the room made it clear what the senior officers thought of her proposal. Coleman silenced them with a sharp gesture. You're a communications specialist, not a field operative, he stated flatly. Your personnel file shows no combat experience or extraction training. Maya's response was measured but firm. My file is incomplete, sir. Before reassignment to communications, I completed advanced terrain navigation and served with the 10th Mountain Division. I've led 3 unofficial extractions during my deployment, all documented in after-action reports that were subsequently classified. Captain Mitchell's face reddened with barely contained anger. This is absurd. We're discussing sending a communications technician to lead a high-risk extraction based on unauthorized mapping and unverified claims of experience. Coleman studied Maya for a long, calculating moment. The seconds ticked by as oxygen levels continued dropping for the trapped soldiers. If you're wrong about any aspect of this, the tunnel location, your ability to navigate it, the position of Talon Squad, you'll not only fail to rescue them, but we'll lose you and your team as well, he said finally. Are you prepared to accept that responsibility? Maya didn't hesitate. Yes, sir. I am. What followed was a blur of rapid preparation. Coleman authorized a minimal extraction team, Maya, 2 combat medics, and a security specialist. They assembled essential equipment while a Black Hawk helicopter was prepared for immediate departure. Throughout the process, Maya could feel the skeptical stares of command personnel who clearly expected the mission to fail. As she loaded the final equipment onto the helicopter, Captain Mitchell approached with thinly veiled hostility. Reynolds, this operation is a desperate gamble based on unverified intelligence. If by some miracle you find Talon Squad, you still need to extract 10 soldiers through terrain you've never personally navigated. Maya secured her gear and met his gaze steadily. With respect, Captain, I know exactly what I'm facing. The question is whether you're prepared for me to succeed where your plan would have failed. As the helicopter lifted off, Maya felt the weight of 10 lives pressing down on her shoulders. The mission had been authorized, but the unspoken expectation was failure. She had 90 minutes to prove everyone wrong, navigate a mountain tunnel system from memory, and extract soldiers before their oxygen ran out completely. Through the helicopter window, the rugged mountains of eastern Afghanistan stretched toward the horizon like a savage, beautiful warning. Maya reviewed her mental map one final time, calculating approach vectors and potential extraction routes with methodical precision. Her grandfather's rescue patch seemed to burn against her sleeve, a reminder of generations of soldiers who had pulled others from the brink of death. The helicopter pilot's voice crackled through her headset. "LZ in 10 minutes. Hope you know what you're doing down there, Reynolds." Maya tightened her equipment straps and checked her oxygen monitor. "So do I," she replied quietly. The real test was about to begin, and the clock was ticking. The Black Hawk descended into a narrow clearing, rotors slicing through the mountain air with rhythmic determination. Maya felt the helicopter touch down with a jolt that traveled through her bones, a reminder that from this moment forward, every decision carried life or death consequences. The extraction team moved with practiced efficiency, unloading essential gear while maintaining constant vigilance against potential threats. Their expressions revealed the doubt they couldn't voice. Following a communications specialist into a mountain death trap wasn't how they'd planned to spend their day. Sergeant Marcus Reeves, the security specialist, scanned the ridgelines with professional paranoia. "Reynolds, we've got approximately 18 minutes to reach your alleged entrance before we're guaranteed to encounter hostile patrols." "If it doesn't exist, it exists," Maya interrupted, shooting her pack and checking her compass bearing. 300 meters southeast, concealed by a rock formation that resembles a crooked finger. The entrance will be partially obscured by scrub vegetation. Combat medics Diaz and Wilson exchanged skeptical glances but followed without comment as Maya led them away from the landing zone. The helicopter lifted off immediately, its departure carefully timed to minimize noise signature in the valley. They would call for extraction only after locating Talon Squad, assuming they found anything but corpses. The terrain was punishing. Loose shale and jagged rocks threatened to twist ankles with every step, while the scorching Afghan sun beat down mercilessly despite the mountain elevation. Maya moved with surprising confidence, picking routes that provided both concealment and efficient progress. Her mind translated the two-dimensional maps she'd memorized into the three-dimensional reality around them. 200 meters, she announced, checking her GPS coordinates against mental landmarks. "We should see the formation after the next ridge." Reeves adjusted his tactical vest with visible skepticism. "And you're absolutely certain this entrance connects to where Talon Squad is trapped?" "Because if we waste our time, I'm certain," Maya replied, her voice betraying no doubt despite the pounding of her heart. The tunnels were originally mining shafts from the Soviet occupation, later expanded by local militias. The secondary entrance was deliberately concealed to serve as an emergency exit. They crested the ridge and faced a steep scree slope dotted with boulder formations. Maya scanned the terrain methodically until her eyes locked onto the distinctive shape she described, a rock spire curving upward like a beckoning finger. "There," she said, pointing toward the formation. "The entrance should be at its base, eastern side." Reeves studied the target area through binoculars, his expression shifting from doubt to grudging acknowledgement. "I see potential cover that could conceal an entrance. Let's move." They descended the slope in controlled slides, using their boots to break against the loose rock. As they approached the formation, Maya felt a flutter of vindication when she spotted the narrow opening partially hidden by dry scrub brush. It was exactly where her maps had indicated, a vertical shaft approximately 1 meter wide descending into darkness. "Breach point located," Reeves confirmed into his radio, his voice betraying surprise at Maya's accuracy. "Preparing for entry and assessment." Maya knelt beside the opening and activated her tactical flashlight, revealing rough-hewn steps carved into the rock, disappearing into blackness. Cool air wafted upward, carrying the unmistakable scent of stone and mineral deposits. "Oxygen levels normal at entrance," she noted, checking her monitoring equipment. "But we need to move quickly." Talon Squad's primary air supply was compromised in the explosion, and they're running on emergency reserves. Wilson, the senior medic, prepared specialized breathing equipment. "How far to their position once we're inside?" "Approximately 600 meters through the main passage, then a right turn at the third junction," Maya replied, securing her headlamp. "If they followed standard operating procedure after the collapse, they'll have retreated to the largest chamber to conserve oxygen." Diaz, the junior medic, looked skeptical. "And you've personally traversed these tunnels before?" No, Maya admitted. But I've mapped them comprehensively based on geological surveys, local informant intelligence, and historical documentation. I know every bend, every chamber, every potential hazard. The team exchanged glances loaded with unspoken doubt, but the clock was ticking. Each minute spent debating was oxygen Talon Squad couldn't afford to lose. Maya descended first, each step deliberate on the ancient stone stairs worn smooth by decades of use. The tunnel gradually widened as they moved deeper, revealing a main passage tall enough to stand in, supported by rough-hewn timber beams that creaked ominously with age and pressure. Watch these support structures, Maya warned, pointing out stress fractures in the wooden beams. The explosion may have compromised structural integrity throughout the system. The air grew thicker as they descended, carrying the distinctive metallic taste of disturbed earth and old explosives. Their headlamps carved cones of visibility in the absolute darkness, creating shifting shadows that played tricks on peripheral vision. Maya consulted her mental map at each junction, identifying landmarks that confirmed they were on the correct path. 500 meters in, she updated, checking her oxygen monitor. Ambient levels still acceptable, but dropping slightly. We should reach them within 12 minutes at current pace. Reeves maintained professional skepticism despite their progress. Assuming they're still alive. Assuming they're where you predict. Assuming this tunnel actually connects to, it connects, Maya cut him off, her certainty unwavering. And they're alive. Talon Squad is led by Lieutenant Harmon. He's a tactical prodigy who graduated top of his class at West Point. He'll have implemented oxygen conservation protocols and positioned his team optimally. The passage narrowed as they approached a junction marked by a natural stone column. Maya paused, studying the diverging paths with practiced assessment. We take the right passage here, she directed. The left leads to a dead end that was once used for ammunition storage. Diaz looked increasingly impressed. How do you know these details if you've never been down here? Because I listen, Maya replied simply. To local guides, to geological survey teams, to old-timers who worked these tunnels during the Soviet era. Intelligence isn't just satellite imagery and drone footage. Sometimes it's sitting with a village elder while he draws tunnel maps in the dirt. They continued through the right passage, which sloped downward at a sharper angle. The timber supports here showed more significant signs of stress, cracks running along load-bearing beams and small showers of dirt cascading from the ceiling with each vibration. The explosion was near here, Maya noted, examining the increasing structural damage. We need to move carefully. The primary collapse is approximately 100 meters ahead, but secondary collapses are possible. Reeves tapped his communications unit with growing frustration. Still no radio contact with Talon Squad. If they're down here, they're either out of range or their equipment is damaged. Or conserving battery power, Maya countered. Standard protocol in a prolonged isolation scenario. The tunnel suddenly widened into a natural cavern where the mining operation had expanded to follow a mineral vein. Their headlamps couldn't penetrate to the chamber's full depth, creating an eerie half-visibility that rendered the space both claustrophobic and expansive simultaneously. This is where the tunnel system branches into 3 primary passages, Maya explained, consulting her mental map. Talon Squad would have retreated to the southeast chamber after the collapse. It's the largest space with the most stable air pocket. Wilson checked his medical equipment with growing urgency. We've been underground for 22 minutes. If your oxygen depletion calculations are correct, they're approaching critical levels. Maya pointed to the rightmost passage. Through there. Approximately 100 meters to the main chamber. We should prepare for potential medical emergencies, dehydration, minor injuries from the initial explosion, and early-stage hypoxia. They move faster now, the growing urgency lending speed to their steps despite the treacherous footing. The passage showed increasing signs of recent disturbance, boot prints in the dust, equipment scrapes along narrow sections, and most encouraging, tactical marker tabs placed at junctions. These are fresh, Reeves confirmed, examining a marker. Standard Army pathfinding indicators. Talon Squad definitely came this way. Maya felt the first surge of validation, but knew that markers didn't guarantee survivors. They pressed forward, the passage gradually widening until they approached a partial collapse where the ceiling had given way. A narrow crawl space remained at floor level, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. This must be what trapped them, Maya observed, examining the debris pile. The main entrance would be completely sealed if this secondary collapse is any indication. She knelt and directed her light through the opening, revealing a larger chamber beyond. The beam caught a reflection, something metallic on the other side. Her heart rate accelerated. Movement protocol, she instructed, reaching for the specialized sound amplifier in her pack. Absolute silence. The team froze as Maya deployed the acoustic device, calibrating it to filter out ambient noise and amplify human sounds. For several agonizing seconds, nothing registered. Then, faintly but unmistakably, she detected it, rhythmic sounds of human breathing, multiple sources. "They're alive," she whispered, a surge of emotion threatening her professional demeanor. "At least some of them." Beyond this collapse, Maya keyed her radio to the emergency frequency used by special operations teams. "Talon Squad, this is Extraction Team Echo. Do you copy? We are at your position, southeast chamber, secondary entrance." The silence stretched painfully until a burst of static erupted from her radio, followed by a weak voice. "This is Lieutenant Harmon. Talon Squad. We copy. 8 survivors, 2 critical. Oxygen, critical levels." The wave of elation that swept through the extraction team was palpable. Maya fought to maintain operational focus despite the vindication surging through her veins. "Lieutenant, we're coming through to you. Prepare your wounded for immediate evacuation. Medical support on site." Maya examined the collapse point, calculating the safest approach. "Reeves, we need to widen this opening without triggering a secondary collapse. The chamber beyond appears stable, but this transition point is compromised." Working methodically, they removed smaller debris pieces while supporting the larger structural elements. Within minutes, they had created an opening large enough to pass equipment and eventually personnel. Maya went through first, entering the chamber where Talon Squad had been fighting for survival. The scene was both better and worse than she'd anticipated. 8 soldiers were alive, huddled in the chamber's center to conserve heat and oxygen. Their faces were dirt-streaked and haggard from hours of uncertainty, but they were conscious. 2 men lay on improvised stretchers, one with a badly broken leg, the other with shrapnel wounds across his torso. Lieutenant Harmon, a compact man with intelligent eyes, approached Maya with visible disbelief. "How did you find us?" he asked, his voice hoarse from dust and dehydration. "Command said extraction was impossible before our oxygen depleted." "Secondary entrance," Maya explained, signaling the medics forward. "I mapped these tunnel systems last year, including access points not on official documentation." Harmon studied her with growing recognition. "You're not regular combat rescue." "Who are you?" "Sergeant Maya Reynolds, communications specialist," she replied, helping the medics establish triage. "We need to move quickly. This entire section is structurally compromised." The disbelief on Harmon's face deepened. "Communications sent you? How did you even know we were here?" "Our primary radio was destroyed in the explosion. I intercepted fragments of your mayday on an alternate frequency," Maya explained, already helping prepare the wounded for transport. Command didn't believe my assessment, but Major Coleman authorized a verification mission. Understanding dawned on Harmon's face. "You came against orders." "On a hunch." "On analysis," Maya corrected, helping secure a wounded soldier for transport. The difference between intuition and intelligence is documentation. The evacuation procedure began immediately. The most critically injured soldier, Corporal James Foster with multiple shrapnel wounds, would go first, followed by Private Wilson with the compound fracture. The remaining soldiers would follow in order of decreasing injury severity. Maya supervised the careful transfer of Foster through the narrow opening they'd created, watching as the medics stabilized him for the journey back. Her radio crackled with an incoming transmission. The extraction helicopter was approaching the landing zone, alerted by their success signal. "First 2 wounded ready for transport," she reported. "Remaining 6 ambulatory, prepared to move in sequence." Major Coleman's voice responded immediately, tension evident despite the poor connection. "Reynolds, satellite shows increased enemy movement in your sector. Extraction window closing rapidly. Get your team moving now." Maya turned to Harmon, who had overheard the transmission. "We need to accelerate. Hostile forces converging on our position." Harmon nodded grimly and turned to his remaining soldiers. "Double time, people. Wounded first, then security element, then remaining personnel." The evacuation moved with urgent precision. For soldiers had already been sent through the narrow passage toward the surface when a distant rumble vibrated through the tunnel system. Maya recognized it immediately, the unmistakable percussion of RPG strikes. "Hostiles have engaged at the surface," she reported, helping the 5th soldier through the passage. "We need to move faster." Harmon and his remaining 2 soldiers prepared to follow when a secondary explosion, much closer, sent a shudder through the entire chamber. Dust and small rocks showered from the ceiling as support timbers groaned under shifting pressure. That wasn't the surface, Maya realized with dawning horror. They're targeting the tunnel system. They know we're here. The implications were immediate and catastrophic. If insurgents collapsed the secondary entrance, they would be trapped again, this time without hope of rescue. The soldiers already moving toward the surface might make it out, but anyone still in the chamber would be buried. Maya made a split-second decision that contradicted every survival instinct. "Lieutenant, take your men through now. I'll follow last and ensure everyone clears the danger zone." Harmon hesitated, the soldier's code against leaving anyone behind warring with tactical necessity. "That's not the protocol, Sergeant. The person who knows the tunnels leads the evacuation. And the mission commander ensures all personnel are extracted," Maya countered, already helping the next soldier into the passage. "I know every centimeter of this system. If anyone can navigate through a partial collapse, it's me." Another explosion rocked the tunnel, closer this time. Fragments of ceiling crashed down around them, raising choking dust clouds that their flashlights couldn't penetrate. The structural integrity was failing rapidly. "Go!" Maya ordered, physically pushing Harmon toward the exit passage. "That's a direct order, Lieutenant. Get your men out now." Military discipline overrode personal objection. Harmon nodded sharply and guided his remaining men into the passage, casting one final look at Maya that carried both gratitude and concern. "We'll hold the entrance as long as possible." Maya didn't waste time responding, already scanning the chamber for alternate routes in case the main passage collapsed before she could follow. Her mental map cycled through possibilities: old ventilation shafts, unmapped crawler tunnels, potential weaknesses in the rock face that could be breached. The radio crackled with increasingly urgent transmissions. The extraction team had reached the surface with the first wounded soldiers. The helicopter was landing under fire. Insurgent forces were closing in on the tunnel entrance. Major Coleman was ordering immediate extraction once the current group reached the surface. Maya started toward the passage just as the most violent explosion yet tore through the tunnel system. The concussion knocked her off her feet as a catastrophic cascade of rock and timber collapsed the passage entrance, sealing it completely with tons of rubble. Dust filled the chamber, choking her lungs and blinding her despite the headlamp. When the rumbling subsided, Maya faced the grim reality: she was sealed inside the mountain with no direct path to the surface. The radio sputtered with fragmented transmissions that barely penetrated the rock. "Collapse confirmed, Reynolds trapped, extraction proceeding, unable to reach." Maya keyed her radio, knowing the signal would barely register on the surface. "This is Reynolds. Primary passage collapsed. Seeking alternate route. Complete the extraction. Do not, repeat, do not attempt rescue at this time." She didn't know if they received her transmission, but the mission parameters were clear. The wounded needed immediate medical attention, and the increasing enemy presence made lingering at the extraction point suicidal. The rational decision, the only decision, was to complete the extraction of the soldiers who had reached the surface and abandon recovery efforts. In the dust-choked darkness of the collapsed chamber, Maya Reynolds faced what many would consider a death sentence. Cut off from the surface, with oxygen levels slowly depleting and no clear escape route, survival seemed mathematically impossible. Yet something stubborn and unyielding burned within her, the same determination that had driven her to create maps no one wanted, to learn skills beyond her assigned duties, to volunteer for a mission everyone expected to fail. Maya checked her oxygen monitor. Levels were dropping but not critically. She had approximately 4 hours before hypoxia would begin affecting her cognitive functions. 4 hours to find a way through solid rock, to navigate a collapsing tunnel system, to defy the death sentence the mountain had just delivered. She activated her backup flashlight and consulted her mental map one final time. There had to be another way out, an overlooked mining shaft, an unmapped natural fissure, something that geological surveys had missed. The question wasn't if an escape route existed, but whether she could find it before her oxygen ran out. With methodical precision, Maya began examining the chamber walls, searching for any indication of structural weakness or connected passages that might lead to the surface. The hunt for life had become a race against time, oxygen, and the unforgiving mountain itself. In the darkness, Maya's breaths came in measured counts. Inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4. The disciplined rhythm conserved oxygen while keeping panic at bay, a technique she'd learned during high-altitude training that now might extend her survival by precious minutes. Her flashlight beam cut through dust particles suspended in the stagnant air, methodically scanning the chamber walls for any anomaly or opportunity. "Think, Reynolds," she whispered to herself, the sound of her voice providing psychological comfort in the oppressive silence. "What did you miss in the surveys?" Maya had spent hundreds of hours studying geological reports of these mountain formations, cross-referencing Soviet-era mining documents with modern satellite imaging. There had to be something, some overlooked detail that could become her salvation. She approached the eastern wall of the chamber, running her fingers along the rough stone surface. The rock composition changed subtly here, transitioning from solid granite to a softer limestone formation. Limestone meant water erosion, and water erosion meant potential natural passages. Her light revealed what she was looking for, almost invisible unless you knew to search for it, a hairline crack running vertically from floor to ceiling, widening slightly near the base. Maya knelt and examined it closely, feeling a faint current of air against her cheek. "Airflow," she murmured, hope flickering to life. "There's a connection to something beyond this wall." Above ground, the extraction operation had devolved into chaos. The Black Hawk helicopter hovered precariously as the rescued members of Talon Squad were loaded aboard under increasingly heavy enemy fire. Lieutenant Harmon, despite a bleeding shoulder wound from covering fire, refused to board. "We can't leave Sergeant Reynolds," he shouted over the rotor wash, gripping Major Coleman's tactical vest. "She's the only reason any of us are alive." Coleman's face was a mask of grim calculation. "The tunnel entrance is completely collapsed. Ground sensors confirm multiple secondary cave-ins throughout the system. We have wounded requiring immediate medical attention and hostiles closing from 3 directions." "Then give me a team," Harmon insisted. "We'll establish a perimeter and begin clearing operations." "With what equipment?" Coleman demanded, gesturing to the barren mountainside. This was a lightning extraction, not a mining operation. "We have no excavation tools, no structural engineers, and approximately 7 minutes before we're completely overrun." The helicopter pilot's voice crackled through their comms. "Taking fire from the northeastern ridge. We need to extract now or risk losing the aircraft." Coleman made the command decision. "Everyone boards now." "That's an order, Lieutenant." Harmon's expression twisted with anguish as the mathematical impossibility of rescue became undeniable. The helicopter could not wait, the wounded would die without immediate treatment, they had no equipment to clear the collapse, and enemy forces were closing in from multiple directions. As the helicopter lifted away from the landing zone, Harmon stared back at the mountain that had become Reynolds' tomb. "We're coming back for her," he said to no one in particular. She didn't abandon us. We won't abandon her. Coleman's response was measured but honest. We'll try, Lieutenant. But she knew the risks when she volunteered. Back in the darkness of the chamber, Maya had no illusions about rescue. The tactical reality was clear: the mission would be classified as a qualified success. 8 soldiers rescued, 1 communications specialist lost. An acceptable ratio by military standards. She had begun systematically widening the crack in the eastern wall, using her combat knife to chip away at the softer limestone. The process was painfully slow, but the increasing airflow confirmed she was breaking through to some adjacent space. After 20 minutes of concentrated effort, the knife blade suddenly pushed through into emptiness. Maya worked faster now, enlarging the opening until she could shine her light through. What she saw nearly stole her breath: a natural fissure approximately 18 inches wide that angled upward through the rock. A water channel, she realized, examining the smooth-worn surfaces. Seasonal runoff must have carved this over centuries. The opening was barely large enough for a human body, requiring her to remove her tactical vest and excess equipment. Maya documented her position and findings using her field notebook, a habit ingrained during her mapping projects. If she didn't survive, at least future teams would know where to look. With a final glance at the collapsed main passage, Maya squeezed her body into the narrow fissure. The space immediately constricted around her, forcing her to inch forward using only the strength of her forearms and the push of her toes. Claustrophobia threatened at the edges of her consciousness, but she focused on the faint airflow against her face, the promise of open space somewhere ahead. The ascent was excruciating. In some sections, the passage narrowed to barely wider than her shoulders, requiring her to exhale completely just to advance another few inches. Her uniform caught on jagged projections, threatening to trap her between immovable stone walls. Each movement was a calculated risk: advance too quickly and risk becoming stuck, move too slowly and watch oxygen levels deplete to critical levels. After what felt like hours but her watch confirmed was only 40 minutes, the passage widened slightly. Maya paused, catching her breath and reassessing. Her headlamp revealed that the fissure continued upward but branched in 2 directions. One path maintained the same gradual ascent, the other appeared to rise more steeply. Higher ground faster, or steadier climb with better odds, she asked herself, calculating remaining oxygen against estimated distance. She chose the steeper path, gambling that it might reach the surface more quickly. The decision nearly proved fatal when, 20 meters further, the passage narrowed dramatically, pinning her left arm against her body and restricting her breathing. For the first time since the mission began, real panic flared in her chest. Maya forced herself to stop moving completely. "Control your breathing," she whispered, fighting against the instinct to struggle. "Panic wastes oxygen." She methodically analyzed her position, identifying which muscles she could still control and which movements might free her. With agonizing patience, she worked her trapped arm millimeter by millimeter until she could rotate her shoulder just enough to continue the ascent. At FOB Condor, the Situation Room had erupted into controlled chaos when the Black Hawk returned with the rescued squad but without Reynolds. Major Coleman delivered his report with military precision, detailing the successful extraction of Talon Squad and the tunnel collapse that had trapped Sergeant Reynolds. Based on structural analysis and time elapsed since collapse, recovery operations are not recommended, he concluded. Survival probability is calculated at less than 3%. Captain Mitchell, who had dismissed Maya's initial report, stared at the tactical display with obvious discomfort. "Are we certain there's no alternative exit? No secondary passage she might access?" "The only confirmed exit was the one she found for the extraction team," Coleman replied. "Any other options would be purely speculative." Lieutenant Colonel Westfield, the base commander, studied the geological survey maps with growing frustration. "How did we miss this tunnel system in our intelligence assessment? How did a communications specialist identify what our tactical teams couldn't?" The question hung awkwardly in the air until Captain Torres stepped forward. "She didn't miss it, sir. Sergeant Reynolds submitted comprehensive mapping documentation last year, including the secondary entrance used in today's extraction. Her reports were classified as non-essential and filed without action. Westfield's expression darkened. "Find those reports. Immediately." Within minutes, Torres returned with a thick file containing Maya's mapping project, dozens of hand-drawn diagrams, geological analyses, topographical overlays, and detailed annotations compiled over hundreds of off-duty hours. The work was meticulous, professional, and potentially life-saving. "This is intelligence work of the highest caliber," Westfield acknowledged, paging through the documents. "Why wasn't this implemented into our tactical systems?" Torres' response was carefully measured. "Her assignment classification didn't permit official reconnaissance work, sir. The reports were submitted through proper channels but deemed outside her operational scope." The unspoken reality hung in the room. A female communications specialist's expertise had been dismissed because of her rank and position, and now that same woman was trapped underground because the intelligence she'd gathered had been ignored until it was almost too late. Westfield turned to the geological expert hastily summoned to assess rescue possibilities. "Based on these maps, could there be additional natural fissures connected to the main tunnel system? Anything she might potentially access?" The geologist studied the documents with growing respect. "These are remarkably detailed. According to her notes, there's significant limestone formations on the eastern chamber wall, which could indicate water channels or natural venting systems. If those exist, and she knows to look for them." "She knows," Lieutenant Harmon interrupted with absolute certainty. "She knew every detail of those tunnels without ever having been inside them. If there's a way out, she'll find it." Westfield made a decision that contradicted standard protocol. "Prepare a limited search operation. Small team, minimal equipment, focused on probable emergence points based on her own mapping data. If she's fighting to get out, we should be there to meet her." Inside the mountain, Maya had reached another critical junction in her ascent. The narrow fissure she'd been following terminated in what appeared to be a small cavern, barely large enough for her to sit upright. Her oxygen monitor showed levels approaching the warning threshold, and her muscles burned from the sustained exertion of climbing through confined spaces. The cavern offered 3 potential exit routes, one continuing upward at a sharp angle, another leading horizontally into darkness, and a third descending slightly but showing signs of greater airflow. Maya consulted her mental map, trying to orient herself relative to the mountain's external geography. "Think three-dimensionally," she reminded herself. "Where would seasonal water flow create the most direct path to the surface?" She chose the path with stronger airflow, reasoning that it must connect more directly to the outside. The passage required her to crawl on hands and knees, navigating around fallen rock debris and through sections where the ceiling dipped so low she had to press her face against the stone floor to advance. The journey became a meditation on persistence. Each meter gained was a victory against gravity, against rock, against time itself. Maya focused on the small goals: reach the next bend, clear the next obstacle, find the next pocket of slightly fresher air. After nearly 2 hours of continuous movement, Maya's headlamp caught a reflection that seemed different from the wet stone surfaces she'd been navigating, something crystalline that sparkled with unnatural brightness. She crawled forward more urgently, discovering a small opening where sunlight penetrated through a narrow crack in the mountain's external face. "Surface contact," she whispered, relief flooding her system so intensely it made her dizzy. The opening was far too small for her body, barely wide enough for her hand, but it confirmed she was approaching the mountain's exterior. Maya examined the surrounding rock carefully. The area around the light penetration was different, less solid, more fractured, with signs of freeze-thaw weathering that had gradually weakened the stone. She began methodically testing sections, searching for portions that might give way under focused pressure. Using her combat knife and the metal edge of her compass, Maya started clearing away loose material around the light source. The work was slow and dangerous. One wrong strike could trigger a collapse that would seal the opening permanently. Sweat ran down her face despite the cool temperature, her muscles trembling with fatigue as she carefully enlarged the gap millimeter by millimeter. After 45 minutes of painstaking effort, She had created an opening approximately 8 inches wide, still far too small for escape, but large enough to give her voice a chance of carrying to the outside. Maya keyed her emergency radio again, knowing the mountain would block most transmission but hoping the proximity to the surface might allow some signal penetration. "This is Sergeant Reynolds, ID 874-31-9285. Attempting self-extraction from mountain tunnel system. Current position approximately 200 meters from original collapse site, approaching eastern face of the ridge. Oxygen levels critical. Requesting location markers or audio signals if anyone monitors this frequency." The radio returned only static. Maya switched to her emergency whistle, producing 3 short blasts followed by 3 long, the universal SOS pattern. The sound was shockingly loud in the confined space, its high pitch carrying through the small opening to the outside world. She repeated the pattern every 30 seconds, alternating with radio calls, while continuing to enlarge the opening. The sunlight penetrating through the gap was fading, either from clouds moving over the mountain or the approach of evening. The thought of spending a night trapped inside the mountain, with oxygen levels continuing to drop, lent desperate energy to her efforts. Outside, the search team deployed by Commander Westfield had been systematically checking potential emergence points based on Maya's own geological mapping. They operated in pairs, moving carefully through territory still potentially monitored by insurgent forces. Each team carried specialized audio detection equipment and emergency excavation tools. Specialist Rodriguez and Corporal Winters were assigned to the eastern ridge face, approximately half a kilometer from the collapsed tunnel entrance. They worked methodically, placing acoustic sensors at intervals and pausing to listen for any sign of movement beneath the surface. "This feels like looking for a needle in a mountain," Winters commented as they secured another sensor. "The odds of her actually finding a way out." Rodriguez adjusted the receiver sensitivity. Lieutenant Harmon said she saved his entire squad when everyone else said it was impossible. "I'm not betting against her." The sensor pad suddenly registered a faint, rhythmic disturbance, too regular to be natural, too persistent to be accidental. Rodriguez froze, adjusting the equipment to isolate the sound. "That's a pattern," he confirmed, disbelief giving way to excitement. "SOS and standard whistle code." They triangulated the signal, narrowing its origin to a section of weathered rock face partially concealed by scrub vegetation. Nothing was immediately visible, but when they cleared away the brush, Rodriguez spotted it, a tiny opening in the stone where it shouldn't exist, barely larger than a coin. Winters grabbed their radio. "Base, this is Search Team Echo. We have potential contact, Eastern Ridge, coordinates 34. 5,215 degrees north, 70. 2,943 degrees east. Acoustic signal consistent with emergency protocols. Request immediate support and extraction team." Rodriguez approached the small opening, calling out with measured volume. "Sergeant Reynolds? This is Specialist Rodriguez. We're receiving your signal. Can you confirm identity?" Inside the fissure, Maya had nearly given up hope when a voice, muffled but unmistakably human, reached her through the small opening. The surge of adrenaline that flooded her system temporarily washed away hours of fatigue and oxygen deprivation. "Confirmed. Sergeant Maya Reynolds, Communications Specialist. Oxygen critical, unable to widen openings sufficient for extraction with available tools." Rodriguez's response was immediate and professional. "Understood, Sergeant. Extraction team en route with equipment. Maintain your position and conserve oxygen. How much clearance do you need?" Maya calculated quickly. Opening needs to be at least 18 inches wide. Current gap approximately 8 inches. Rock is fractured but requires proper tools to clear safely. Copy that. Help is coming. Maintain communication at 1-minute intervals to conserve energy. Outside, the extraction operation mobilized with astonishing speed. The search team's confirmation of Maya's survival transformed a recovery mission into a rescue, with corresponding urgency. A specialized extraction unit deployed via helicopter to the nearest safe landing zone, carrying hydraulic spreaders, compact cutting equipment, and emergency medical supplies. Major Coleman personally oversaw the operation, his earlier calculations about survival probability shattered by Reynolds' extraordinary perseverance. "Time from landing zone to extraction point," he demanded as the team disembarked. 12 minutes over difficult terrain, sir," the team leader replied. "Plus approximately 20 minutes for careful excavation, assuming the structural assessment is accurate." Coleman nodded grimly. "That's cutting it close for her remaining oxygen. Move as if your own life depends on it." At the extraction point, Rodriguez maintained communication with Maya through the small opening, providing updates on the rescue team's progress while monitoring her condition through voice pattern changes. Her responses were becoming slower, her words occasionally slurring, classic signs of advancing hypoxia. "Stay with me, Sergeant," he urged during one concerning pause. "The team is 7 minutes out with extraction equipment. I need you to keep talking." "Still here," Maya responded, her voice fainter. "Conserving oxygen." "Tell me something interesting." Rodriguez recognized the request for what it was, a psychological anchor to maintain consciousness. "Your mapping saved Talon Squad." Lieutenant Harmon insisted on organizing this search operation himself. He refused medical evacuation until Commander Westfield promised to look for you. The extraction team arrived in a controlled rush, equipment carriers moving with practiced efficiency despite the treacherous terrain. The team leader assessed the situation quickly, identifying the safest approach to widening the opening without triggering additional collapse. "Sergeant Reynolds," he called through the small gap. "This is Captain Dawson, extraction specialist. We're setting up hydraulic spreaders to widen this opening. I need you to move back from the gap approximately 2 meters if possible. There will be debris and dust." Inside, Maya dragged herself backward through the narrow passage, each movement requiring conscious effort as oxygen deprivation affected her muscle coordination. "Clear of opening," she confirmed. Proceeding with extraction. The team worked with methodical urgency, carefully inserting the hydraulic spreader tips into the small gap and gradually applying pressure to the fractured rock. The stone resisted initially, then gave way with a series of sharp cracks as natural fault lines surrendered to mechanical force. Captain Dawson continually tested the structural integrity, ensuring they weren't triggering a larger collapse that could bury Maya completely. The opening gradually widened, 10 inches, 12, 15, revealing the narrow passage beyond. "I can see into the fissure," Dawson reported. "It appears stable despite our intervention." "Reynolds, status report?" There was no immediate response, sending a chill through the extraction team. "Reynolds, do you copy?" Dawson repeated with increased urgency. After an agonizing pause, Maya's voice returned, barely audible and clearly struggling. "Still here. Oxygen, very low. Vision, narrowing." Dawson accelerated their efforts, accepting slightly higher structural risk against the certainty of Maya losing consciousness within minutes. The hydraulic spreaders strained against their maximum extension, widening the gap to nearly 18 inches. "That's our threshold," Dawson announced. "I'm going in to assess and assist." He removed his tactical vest and equipment belt, keeping only a flashlight and emergency oxygen canister. With careful movements, Dawson eased himself into the narrow opening, pushing forward until he could see Maya's form in the confined space beyond. She lay partially curled against the passage wall, her headlamp flickering with nearly depleted batteries. Her breathing was shallow and irregular, the final stages before unconsciousness. Dawson pushed the emergency oxygen canister ahead of him, calling to her with calm urgency. "Reynolds, I've got supplemental oxygen. I need you to focus on my voice and reach for the canister." Maya's eyes fluttered open at the sound, her training overriding even the biological shutdown occurring from oxygen deprivation. With trembling hands, she grasped the canister and positioned the emergency mask over her face. The effect was almost immediate, the concentrated oxygen flow restoring enough cognitive function for her to understand and respond to commands. Dawson guided her through the extraction process with patient precision. "We're going to move you out feet first," he explained. "The team will help guide you through from the outside. Conserve your energy and let us do the work." With oxygen temporarily restored, Maya found the strength to cooperate with the extraction. The team outside carefully maneuvered her legs through the widened opening, supporting her weight to prevent injury as her torso and finally her head emerged from the mountain that had nearly become her tomb. The moment Maya Reynolds fully emerged from the mountain passage into the fading afternoon light, a spontaneous cheer erupted from the rescue team. Medical personnel immediately surrounded her, securing the oxygen supply and checking her vital signs while the extraction specialists ensured the passage remained stable. Maya squinted against the sudden brightness, her dust-covered face breaking into a weary smile as she recognized Major Coleman standing nearby, his expression a complex mixture of disbelief and respect. "Welcome back to the world, Sergeant," he said, approaching as the medical team stabilized her condition. "You've rewritten our tactical response protocols with this operation." Maya's voice was hoarse but steady as her oxygen levels normalized. "Just following the data, sir. The mountain tells its own story if you know how to listen." As the medical team prepared her for transport, Maya caught sight of Lieutenant Harmon standing at the perimeter, his arm in a fresh sling from his earlier wound. Their eyes met across the distance, an unspoken understanding passing between them, two soldiers who had faced impossible odds and refused to surrender. The extraction team secured the site and prepared for immediate evacuation as the sun dipped lower behind the mountain ridges. Maya Reynolds would leave these mountains alive, having conquered them not with weapons or force, but with intelligence, preparation, and unyielding determination. Her grandfather's rescue patch, still attached to her torn uniform despite everything she'd endured, caught the last rays of sunlight as they loaded her onto the medical transport. The faded words stitched into its fabric seemed to glow with renewed purpose, "that others may live." The Black Hawk helicopter carrying Maya Reynolds approached FOB Condor as darkness settled over the Afghan mountains. Through the aircraft's window, she watched base lights emerge from the gloom like a constellation of earthbound stars. Military efficiency awaited her landing, a medical team standing by, debriefing officers prepared with questions, standard protocols for soldiers who had faced extraordinary circumstances. What Maya couldn't see were the ripples her actions had created throughout the command structure. News of the impossible rescue had spread across tactical channels with lightning speed. A communications specialist had found a hidden tunnel entrance, extracted an elite squad written off as lost, then escaped a mountain collapse through sheer determination and specialized knowledge no one realized she possessed. The helicopter touched down on the landing pad with practiced precision. As medical personnel transferred her to a gurney despite her weak protests that she could walk, Maya noticed something unusual. Soldiers lined the path to the medical facility, not just medical staff or command officers, but dozens of personnel from various units. They stood at respectful attention, creating a corridor of silent acknowledgement. "What's happening?" she asked the medic monitoring her oxygen levels. "They're here for you, Sergeant," he replied simply. Word travels fast when someone does the impossible. Inside the medical unit, doctors confirmed what the field assessment had indicated. Maya suffered from minor oxygen deprivation, moderate dehydration, multiple lacerations and contusions, and physical exhaustion. Nothing life-threatening, but enough to warrant overnight observation and restricted duty for at least 72 hours. Commander Westfield visited her bedside within the hour, his usual formal demeanor softened by genuine respect. "Sergeant Reynolds," he began, pulling up a chair beside her bed. "I've been reviewing your personnel file along with the mapping documentation you submitted last year. There seems to be a significant discrepancy between your assigned duties and your demonstrated capabilities." Maya maintained professional composure despite her fatigue. "I've always believed in expanding my skill set beyond assigned parameters, sir." "That expansion saved 8 lives today," Westfield noted. "Lieutenant Harmon's report describes your actions in the tunnel system as displaying tactical brilliance and technical expertise that would be exceptional in a special operations officer, let alone a communications specialist." He placed a folder on the side table, her original mapping reports, now bearing approval stamps and classification markings that hadn't been there before. "Your tunnel mapping project has been officially incorporated into our tactical intelligence database," Westfield continued. "Effective immediately, These materials will be standard reference for all operations in the region. Furthermore, I'm recommending you for immediate reassignment to the Tactical Reconnaissance Unit with appropriate rank adjustment. Maya felt a complex wave of emotions, vindication mixed with the simple satisfaction of having her work finally recognized. Thank you, sir. But I'd like to complete my current communications assignment as well. The knowledge gaps I identified in our intelligence came from monitoring channels others considered irrelevant. Westfield nodded thoughtfully. That won't be a problem. Your new position will include significant latitude to define operational parameters based on your demonstrated judgment. After the commander left, Maya allowed herself to sink into the hospital bed, physical exhaustion finally claiming its due. The day's events played through her mind in disconnected fragments, the trapped soldiers' faces when she first reached them, the suffocating darkness of the collapsed tunnel, the first breath of fresh air when the extraction team broke through. She was drifting towards sleep when the door opened again, revealing Lieutenant Harmon leaning on a crutch, his wounded leg now properly bandaged in his arm in a tactical sling. "Reynolds," he said quietly, checking if she was awake. "Mind if I come in?" Maya pushed herself to a sitting position, wincing at muscles strained beyond their limits during her underground escape. "Of course not, Lieutenant. How's your team?" "All stable, thanks to you." Harmon took the chair Westfield had vacated. "Corporal Foster is being airlifted to Germany for specialized treatment, but he'll recover. The rest are already planning how to tell this story at every bar from here to Fort Bragg for the next 20 years. A smile crossed Maya's tired face. "They'll probably improve the details with each telling." "The actual details are impressive enough," Harmon replied, his expression turning serious. "When you stayed behind to ensure everyone got through, that was beyond the call of duty." Maya shook her head slightly. It was the tactically sound decision. The person with the most knowledge of the tunnel system had the best chance of finding an alternate route if the primary exit collapsed. "Most people would call that courage, not tactics," Harmon observed. "I've found they're often the same thing," Maya replied. "Courage is just tactics applied to fear." The conversation paused as a medical technician entered to check Maya's vital signs and adjust her for. When they were alone again, Harmon leaned forward with an earnest intensity. "I need to ask you something, Reynolds. Something that's been bothering me since we got out." Maya nodded for him to continue. "When you found us, you knew exactly where to look, how to navigate tunnels you'd never physically entered, how to identify structural weaknesses, knowledge that wasn't in any official documentation. You created that intelligence on your own time, without orders or recognition, when it wasn't even your assignment." He paused, searching for the right words. "Why? Why put in that kind of effort when the system clearly wasn't acknowledging your contributions?" The question cut to the heart of something Maya had never fully articulated, even to herself. She glanced at her grandfather's rescue patch, still attached to her uniform folded on the nearby chair. "Because some work is worth doing even when no one's watching," she said finally. "Those tunnel maps might never have been needed. But if they were, if even one life could be saved because I took the time to create them, then every hour was justified." She met Harmon's gaze directly. "The system doesn't always recognize the right things at the right time. That doesn't change what needs to be done." Harmon absorbed her words with quiet appreciation. "Well, they're recognizing it now. The command staff is completely reevaluating how intelligence is gathered and categorized because of what happened today. Your methods are becoming the new standard." The following morning brought more visitors than Maya expected, members of Talon Squad stopping by before their medical evacuation, communications colleagues curious about her unprecedented field operation, and finally, to her surprise, Major Coleman. He entered her room with the stiff formality of a man preparing to acknowledge a significant error in judgment. "Sergeant Reynolds. The medical team reports you're recovering well." "Yes, sir. Ready to return to duty tomorrow." Coleman nodded, then fixed her with a penetrating stare. "I made a tactical error yesterday. When you first reported intercepting Lieutenant Harmon's transmission, I dismissed your assessment based on your service classification rather than evaluating the intelligence on its merits. He paused, military discipline warring with the humility required for genuine accountability. That error nearly cost 8 lives, and it did risk yours unnecessarily. I wanted to acknowledge that personally. Maya recognized the significance of the gesture, a senior officer formally acknowledging a mistake to a subordinate, particularly a female non-combat specialist. I appreciate that, sir. But the mission succeeded because command ultimately did make the right decision. You authorized the verification team when conventional wisdom argued against it. Coleman's expression softened slightly. Only after substantial resistance. The lesson for command is clear: intelligence value isn't determined by the source's rank or specialty designation. That's been true since the dawn of warfare, sir, Maya replied with careful respect. The challenge is creating systems that recognize it consistently. Which is precisely why Commander Westfield has appointed you to lead the new Integrated Intelligence Initiative, Coleman announced. Your first assignment will be developing protocols to ensure specialist knowledge across all units is properly captured and incorporated into tactical planning. 3 weeks later, Maya stood before a joint service briefing at Central Command, presenting the findings from what was now officially designated Operation Talon Recovery. The audience included senior officers from every branch of service, intelligence specialists, and tactical planners responsible for operations across the region. She moved through her presentation with confident precision, using the mission as a case study in intelligence integration. The critical failure wasn't technological or tactical, but organizational, she explained. Vital knowledge existed within our personnel resources but remained isolated due to arbitrary classification boundaries. On the display behind her, a comprehensive visual representation of the tunnel system appeared, her original mapping expanded with new data gathered during the rescue operation. This represents what one specialist could document through unofficial channels, she continued. Now imagine this level of detailed intelligence gathering happening systematically across all operational zones, with proper integration into tactical planning. Commander Westfield took the podium after her presentation, addressing the assembled officers directly. Sergeant Reynolds, Lieutenant Reynolds following her field promotion, has demonstrated the transformative potential of what we're calling integrated intelligence methodology. Central Command has authorized immediate implementation of these protocols throughout the Afghan theater. The briefing concluded with something rare in military proceedings: spontaneous applause. As officers filed out of the room, many paused to speak with Maya personally, asking questions about implementation specifics or offering congratulations on her promotion. General Harrison, the regional commander who had flown in specifically for the briefing, approached her last. "Lieutenant, your presentation was exceptional. But I'm curious about something that wasn't covered. When you were trapped after the tunnel collapse, with oxygen depleting and no clear exit route, what kept you going?" Many would have accepted the situation as unsurvivable. Maya considered the question carefully. It probed beyond tactical analysis into something more fundamental about human resilience. "I had mapped those mountains for hundreds of hours, sir," she replied finally. "I knew there were water channels, natural fissures, seasonal ventilation patterns. I just had to find them. Giving up would have meant rejecting everything I knew to be true about the terrain." The general nodded thoughtfully. "Conviction in your own knowledge, even when circumstances suggested otherwise." "Knowledge isn't circumstantial, sir," Maya responded. "Either I was right about the mountain's structure, or I wasn't. Being trapped underground didn't change the geological reality, it just tested my confidence in what I'd learned." After the general departed, Maya remained in the briefing room, gathering her materials as the space emptied. Through the windows, she could see aircraft taking off from the base runway, carrying soldiers to various missions across the country. Each of those operations would now incorporate intelligence-gathering protocols she had designed, transforming how the military identified and utilized specialized knowledge regardless of its source. Captain Torres entered quietly, carrying a small wooden box. "Quite a presentation, Lieutenant. You've started something that will outlast all of us." Maya smiled at her longtime supporter. "None of this would have happened if you hadn't advocated for my mapping project from the beginning. I recognized good work, Torres replied simply. Too many didn't. That's what's changing now. She handed Maya the wooden box. This arrived for you today. Special courier from the States. Inside the box, Maya found a gleaming new rescue patch, identical to her grandfather's but unworn, its colors vivid and its edges crisp. A small note accompanied it in familiar handwriting, for continuing the tradition with honor. Proud beyond words. Maya traced the embroidered motto with her finger, that others may live. The phrase had guided her grandfather through Vietnam rescue operations and had unconsciously shaped her own actions decades later in a collapsed tunnel under an Afghan mountain. 6 months after the Talon Squad rescue, Maya stood on a helicopter landing pad at Fort Bragg, watching a training exercise for the newly formed Special Reconnaissance Division. The unit had been created based on recommendations from her Intelligence Integration Program, a specialized team combining tactical expertise with advanced knowledge in geology, meteorology, communications, and regional studies. Lieutenant Harmon, now fully recovered and serving as training officer, approached as the exercise concluded. What do you think, Lieutenant Reynolds? Ready for field deployment? Maya watched the diverse team secure their equipment with practiced efficiency. They're technically proficient. The real test will be how they integrate diverse expertise under pressure. That's not something you can fully simulate in training. They have your operational protocols as their foundation, Harmon pointed out. And your rescue as their inspiration. Half of them joined specifically because of what happened at Talon Mountain. The name had stuck. The ridge where Talon Squad had been trapped and where Maya had orchestrated the impossible rescue was now officially designated Talon Mountain on military maps. More significantly, the tunnel system she had mapped was now completely documented in the tactical database, with her original notes cited as the primary source. The protocols are just guidelines, Maya replied, watching the team's movements critically. What matters is creating a culture where expertise is valued regardless of rank or specialty designation. Where a private with the right knowledge is heard as clearly as a colonel with the wrong assumptions. Harmon smiled at her characteristic directness. That culture shift is happening. Your promotion ceremony tomorrow is proof of that. Maya had been selected for accelerated advancement to captain, unusual for someone so recently promoted to lieutenant, but justified by her extraordinary field performance and the strategic impact of her intelligence integration program. The ceremony would include special recognition from Central Command, acknowledging her contributions to military doctrine. The promotion is symbolic, she said, maintaining professional modesty. The real victory is institutional change. Later that evening, Maya sat alone in her quarters, reviewing final details for the Special Reconnaissance Division's first official deployment. The mission parameters reflected everything she had advocated for: intelligence gathering prioritized equally with tactical objectives, specialist knowledge integrated into operational planning from the beginning rather than as an afterthought. A knock at her door interrupted her concentration. She opened it to find a young specialist standing nervously at attention, holding a folder marked with intelligence classification codes. Lieutenant Reynolds? I'm Specialist Chen from Geological Survey. I've identified some anomalies in the Eastern Province terrain maps that don't match current intelligence assessments. Maya recognized the situation immediately, a junior specialist with potentially critical information but no established channel for ensuring it reached tactical planning. Come in, Specialist, she said, clearing space at her work table. Show me what you found. As Chen spread out his maps and began explaining the discrepancies he'd identified, Maya felt a profound sense of completion. The system was changing, not just through official protocols but through individual soldiers feeling empowered to bring forward their specialized knowledge. The next morning, Maya stood at attention as Commander Westfield pinned captain's bars to her uniform while a formation of soldiers witnessed the ceremony. Among them were the members of Talon Squad, Lieutenant Harmon standing at their head with evident pride. Also present was her grandfather, now in his 80s but still standing tall in his Vietnam-era uniform, watching as his granddaughter received recognition that transcended the rescue patch he'd given her years ago. After the formal proceedings, As personnel gathered for the reception, Maya found herself momentarily alone with her grandfather near the memorial wall that honored fallen soldiers from the base. "You've changed things, Maya," he said, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had seen military institutions resist change for decades. "Not just rescued those men, but transformed how the entire system values knowledge." Maya looked around at the gathering, officers and enlisted personnel from diverse specialties, many of whom had implemented her intelligence integration protocols in their respective units. "I just created maps that needed to exist," she replied with characteristic understatement. "The terrain was always there, I just made it visible." Her grandfather's weathered hand rested on her shoulder. "That's how lasting change happens. Not by fighting against what exists, but by making visible what was always there but overlooked. You didn't just rescue those soldiers from that mountain, you're rescuing the entire system from its own blindness." As the reception continued around them, Maya touched the new rescue patch now properly sewn onto her dress uniform. The words remained the same across generations, that others may live, but their meaning had expanded beyond physical rescue to something more profound. Knowledge shared so others could succeed. Expertise recognized so others could benefit. Systems improved so others could thrive. The mountain had tested her in darkness, but the light she had brought forth was illuminating paths for countless others who would never know her name but would benefit from the changes she had initiated. Perhaps that was the greatest rescue of all, not just saving lives in the moment, but transforming systems to save lives for generations to come. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.